what would I do if I, God forbid 1,000 times, only had 6 months to live? And I realized, well, I wouldn't be working this job, and that's for sure. And so then I thought, well, if I wouldn't do this in my last 6 months of life, why am I doing it at all? Because none of us knows how much time we have. I could get hit by a bus tomorrow. So if it's not right for me, if I knew I only had a limited time, most of us don't know how much time we have. Why am I wasting even a day here?
Welcome to Parent Footprint with Dr. Dan. I'm Dr. Dan. This show is about making the world a more loving, accepting, and compassionate place, one parent, one person, and one child at a time. The key to raising healthy and engaged kids is for parents to seek the same in their own lives while striving to be the best versions of themselves each day, no matter who you are or where you came from. With increased awareness, you can be purposeful about leaving a healthy footprint for your children, your family, and all those you care about while living your own life to the fullest. Today's show is From Yoga to True Crime with Sara DiVello. Sara is a true crime writer and author of her new thriller, Broadway Butterfly. She's also the creator and host of Mystery and Thriller Mavens, a popular author series and interactive Facebook group. For her weekly Mystery and Thriller Mavens live events, she's interviewed more than 300 authors, ranging from best-selling and world-renowned to the buzziest debuts. While creative and active on her own social media platforms, Sara also serves as a director of social media strategy for the International Thriller Writers Association. She has appeared on CBS, ABC, and CNBC, as well as written in the New York Times, Forbes, the San Francisco Chronicle, and more. She's been published on Marie Claire, Elle, Redbook, Cosmopolitan, and Women's Day, among many, many others. Her memoir, which is also amazing, Where in the Om Am I? One Woman's Journey from Corporate World to the Yoga Mat, was an Amazon #1 bestseller. Most importantly, in her spare time, Sara loves to teach yoga, cook and eat, garden, go for leisurely walks with her husband and their beloved rescue mutt, Peluda. She's passionate about all things books, especially mysteries and thrillers, the craft of writing, and connecting readers to their favorite authors, as well as introducing them to their new discoveries. Sara, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dan. I'm so excited to be here.
We have a lot to talk about because there's this journey from corporate America to yoga instructor and yogi to a mystery murder thriller writer. And so, and I've just been a deep dive in your book. So first of all, I want to start with saying Broadway Butterfly, I was captivated. I am captivated, and I have so many questions about that. And then I dove in. I went backwards. I went from the recent to the past, and then I went back to your memoir, which is absolutely awesome and honest and real. So I guess we're going to cover all that. To start, your experience of corporate America and the way you describe it, I was imagining it was a TV show. Like it's unfortunately like a reality TV show. Like all of the negative aspects you hear about in corporate America, you experience that. So like you're nodding your head. So tell us a little bit about like that. And that was over a decade, I believe, part of your life.
Yes. Yeah, so I worked my way through college in the university's public relations office, so doing PR and marketing. And then when I graduated with my degree in communications and all that work experience, having worked my way through, I went right into the field. So, PR marketing is like any trade skill. So if you're a carpenter, you can build a doghouse or you can build a skyscraper because you know how to build things. And when you do PR marketing, you can do PR marketing for a university or financial services or for, a beauty company. It's the same machinations to get the word out to the people they're trying to reach. So when I graduated in 1999, the economy was booming, everything was up, everything was doing great. And financial services, I moved from Philadelphia to Boston, and which was the fifth largest financial center in the world. And financial services was the industry that was hiring. So I happened to put my trade skills to work in that field. And little did I know that I would blink and a decade of my life would go by in that world that I had never intended to be in, but found myself in because I, in spite of having worked my way through, I came out, I still had student loans and then eventually car payments and mortgages and all those real world responsibilities that weigh us down. And so the financial services happened to be the industry that was hiring in the city that I moved to. And so I took a job without any intention or forethought because DiVello had bills to pay
Right.
and I had skills that could be used in any industry. Now, I knew at approximately 9:05 a.m. on day one that this was not for me. Like I walked in and I was like,
Pretty
oh
early
no.
on. Pretty early on. Okay.
Exactly. And although I felt kind of cool, like Melanie Griffith for those of us old enough to remember Working Girl,
Yep.
or Jennifer Gardner in 13 Going on 30 for those of us who are slightly younger, I was like, oh, look at me, I'm corporate Barbie, and
Yep.
I like to wear I like to dress up in the role and carry my briefcase, and I felt very official and very cool walking into the skyscraper and having the ID to go through security and go up 50 stories to the fancy office in the fancy building. I knew I didn't belong there, but I stayed and I worked there anyway because again I had bills to pay and student loans to repay. And then honestly, I got sucked into the hustle
Mm-hmm.
and the addictive hustle of, okay, now I've got a press conference to plan. Ooh, I did that, but now I've got another one to plan. And then, the deadline driven world. And then, oh, I got, I'm up for a promotion. Well, I'd like to get that. Ooh, now I'm up for an office and I get to move out of a cubicle. Well, now I'm up for a bigger office. And it's always, something more that you can go for. And I blinked and 10 years of my life had gone by. And that's the thing, is that busy sucks you in
Mm-hmm.
and distracts you. And if you are not taking the time and you don't have the tools from going to therapy, which I am a huge fan of and have benefited so richly from, or a yoga practice, or the practice of looking inward, the tools to look inward and say, am I doing what I am meant to do? Or am I doing what is familiar, convenient,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
expected by
Yeah.
me or by some parental voice that may or may not be actually a parental voice, or lucrative, am I doing the work I am called to do, what is authentic and real and feels fulfilling to me? Or am I just sucked into busy and doing what is familiar, convenient, easy, and lucrative? And for a long time, I was doing just what felt expected, and then what was easy and what felt safe because it was familiar. And it felt too scary to leave that and start over and, have no network or no money, or all of those things that we take safety and comfort and actually help us get through the day. So that
Mm-hmm.
is how I got sucked in. And that is why I stayed for 10 years.
And okay. And about what, 7 years in ish is when
Yes.
you also were like, I need something different. And you took this bold move to take a very rigorous yoga training class, right? So you had an awareness of,
Yes.
okay, this isn't all that there is, and there's got to be more. Like, so what was that?
Yes.
Like, what was that pull to yoga in this journey?
So three factors combined to sort of help me get the courage to first take that yoga training, which then gave me the tools and the certification to then eventually quit my job and leave my work. my corporate career. And those three factors were, number one, I happened to work under a parade of what I can only describe as stupendously bad female bosses. And you
Mm-hmm.
are,
Yes.
you're reading the book, so you know we're
Oh my
talking
gosh. Yes.
vomiting Vicky.
Vicky, vomiting Vicky. Oh my gosh. Okay.
We're
Yes. Yeah.
talking vomiting Vicky. We're
Yeah.
talking, and she is only one in a
Right.
parade of bad female bosses, which is really weird because at the time, and I think still to this day, financial services is super male dominated. And so
Mm-hmm.
I would be in a room with 90 men, and then it would be me and maybe one other woman. And that woman would usually be my boss because marketing and PR was the one little corner where women actually did have a chance of having a higher level position, whereas in sales or the rest of the company, and certainly in the C-level suite, there was no women to be found. And so I would be waving like, hey sister,
Yeah.
we're gonna
Yeah.
you could be my mentor and I'll be your faithful good doobie. And she was more like, I'm going to kill
Yeah.
you and stab
Yeah.
you and
Yes.
step over.
You are a threat to me. Yeah.
Yes. And I
Yeah.
think that threat comes from a sense of scarcity. So for me, it was like, hey, it's only me and you. Let's do this
Right.
together.
Yeah.
But for her, it was, hey, there's me and you, but there's only one seat at the table. So if it's me or you, it's going to be me.
Right.
And that sense of scarcity creates some really competitive, really ugly behavior. And I think that is the underlying
Yeah.
root cause of it.
Let me just jump in and say that there is previous lit research that found that women bosses treated their female employees more poorly than male bosses treated their female employees.
And that in my first of all, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And in my
Yeah.
lived experience, I am here to testify that that is 100% true
Wow.
and so counterintuitive because for
Right.
me, I was like, again, I'm looking around the room and there's 90 dudes, there's two of us. And so I feel solidarity with her,
Yeah.
but she doesn't. And so I actually was treated much better, way better by the men in the
Mm.
company than I was by any of my female bosses who were extremely backstabbing and undercutting and just really brutal. So
Mm-hmm.
that was the first factor.
Okay.
Was stupendous parade of stupendously bad female bosses. The second factor that was that as I stared down the barrel of 30, which my God, I wish I was staring down again. Now I'm looking at
Yeah.
50, but is that I had this realization that, oh my God, a decade of my life has gone by without me doing what feels authentic and real and fulfilling to me. And if I'm not careful and if I don't make a bold choice, it's going to be another decade and then another decade. And you could really lose a whole life like that. That was the second factor, was this wake up call of, oh my God, it just decade went by like a second. The third factor was that my mother was diagnosed with terminal breast cancer and given 6 months to live.
Mm.
And it was such a wake up call because I no one in our family had ever had cancer. It was so shocking to my system that someone could have only 6 months to live. And so my mother had to ask herself, what do I want to do with this very short window of time? Do I want to travel? Do I want to stay at home? We had a family reunion for her so she could see everyone. And so I started thinking, what would I do if I, God forbid 1,000 times, only had
Mm-hmm.
6 months to live? And I realized, well, I wouldn't be working this job, and that's for sure. And so then I thought, well, if I wouldn't do this in my last 6 months of life, why am I doing it at all? Because none of us knows how much time we have. I could get hit by a bus tomorrow. So
Mm-hmm.
if it's not right for me, if I knew I only had a limited time, most of us don't know how much time we have. Why am I wasting even a day here? And that, was this crystallizing moment. It all kind of happened in, around the same time as each
Mm-hmm.
other. And I stayed because I was scared and because I took comfort in financial safety. I stayed for 4 more years, but it planted that seed of awareness that eventually gave me the courage to leave.
Beautiful. Beautiful. You start your book with the definition of authenticity.
Yes.
True to one's own personality, spirit, or character,
Yes.
per the Merriam-Webster dictionary. And that is, so you had these experiences that led you to start looking within while
Yes.
still playing the game, working hard, being mistreated, particularly by the female authorities, as you write about them in your memoir, Medusa, the other one. And okay, and you're also at the same time going through this rigorous yogi training with
Mm-hmm.
what's seemingly a very powerful yogi instructor,
Mm-hmm.
and then you're experiencing with your women yogi training sisters like the same brutal dynamics in this supposed to be namaste place.
Yes. So I thought, because I had enjoyed the benefits of going to a yoga class after a tough day at work, and and sweating it out and zenning it out and then oming it out, and then you go in a big stress ball, and then an hour or 75 minutes or 90 minutes later you float out on this cloud of zen, and you're thinking, oh, this is so great, and I love yoga. This is just my savior and my comfort. And so I thought, well, if I'm getting this level of release and of relaxation from doing yoga, imagine if I was teaching yoga. And I wanted to immerse myself in it more, because it really was helping me to survive. That was what was helping me to survive my job and the bad bosses and my mother's diagnosis and all of this madness. So I thought, I really want to learn more about this. And I actually had looked at a lot of different ways to immerse myself in that. So I had looked at, well, what would it be like if I went back and did a master's in Hindu philosophy? What if I just learned about the philosophy end of it, or what if I did a PhD in it? But then I'm like, well, what the heck am I going to do with a PhD in Hindu philosophy? I'm not going to go become a professor. Also, that would be 6 years and more student loan debts that I then have to pay off working this job. So I thought, I'll do a yoga teacher training. I'll learn more about the philosophy and the physical practice. And that'll be a really great way to, zen out. And I'll go, every weekend, once a month, and then I'll just relax all weekend at the training. And then I'll go back to my job, fresh from yoga teacher training, feeling relaxed and centered from a lovely weekend of zenning out. Little did I know, Dr. Dan, 'twas not to be.
No.
Because it was just
rigorous.
It was so rigorous, and a full, 10-day immersion into anatomy with an anatomy teacher, learning every muscle, every bone, every sinew of the body. And then, learning Hindu philosophy with a professor of Hindu philosophy, learning Sanskrit, which is an incredibly complex language, both the alphabet so that we could read it, the words, every meaning, because Sanskrit is the only language in the world that is consciously created. Like, it didn't emerge from caveman grunts.
Mm-hmm.
The Indians sat down and said, let's create a language for the gods. So every syllable has meaning, every word has meaning. And so you have to really learn and appreciate the meanings and the intention behind every syllable, behind every letter. So it was extremely intense learning. And then it was made extra intense by the kaleidoscope of interesting personalities, which I'm sure you would have a delight diagnosing. I mean, let's get you in there. Let's get you in there.
Yes. The characteristics of, oh my gosh. So, like Brinley's character, not her real name, but like,
nobody's
oh my gosh,
name.
when like there's always seeming in all of my intensive trainings and workshops, there is that character type. And then some of the others, who are also supposed to be mental health professionals and these evolved artist creative types themselves, were just like, oh my gosh, just backstabbing and mean and righteous and oh my gosh.
Fake. And fake.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Yeah. It turns
Yes.
out the yogis are just as bitchy, backstabbing, and cutthroat as the corporates, but the difference is they cloak it in behind this veil of pretending to be yogic, whereas you're going to get cut in the corporate world, but in the
Right.
yoga world, it hurt. It was
Yeah.
unexpected because I
Right.
thought I was hanging out with a bunch of Zen,
Right.
cool people.
Right. Well, and through this process, so again, this is a whole process of being authentic, and it's like the veils being pulled back, not only of yourself, but in so many things like this world, which you thought was a certain, and then it's like people are just people,
Yeah.
regardless of what they do. And I wrote down this great awareness that you consolidated from one of the teachings during this time when people were being very challenging, both at work and at in your class, in your training. That you said this is actually a blueprint for navigating life and relationships, and
Mm,
that is understand the other person's pain or reason or story, but don't indulge it. Honor
mm.
honor the experiences of others, but don't get caught up in them. Always allow yourself to believe that their story can change.
Yes. Yes.
You are
And that's
challenged to do that.
and it is a challenge because
Yes.
it's hard not to get sucked in.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
it's hard not to get hurt. But that is the blueprint that I try to ideally stick to. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, and so okay, what's also great about the story is the way that you finally left the corporate world was completely almost like orchestrated by the corporate world and all the
mm,
BS with it. And so the thing that you want to run away from the most finally makes it that you have to leave. Like the universe gave you, I'm sure in hindsight, a gift that didn't seem like a gift at the time. And I love the your announcement, your wonderfully supportive husband who pumped you up to go
mm.
into HR, and basically you're like, you know what? Someone can only eat so much shit, and I'm done eating shit. I quit.
That is what I said. That is what I said. And the look on the HR person's face, on the HR woman's face, that when I said that will live forever rent free in my brain, because she was so shocked that someone would say it and that someone would leave was made it all worthwhile, because
Mhm,
that moment of standing up for myself, pumped up, as you said, by my wonderfully supportive husband, because I was shaking in my boots,
mhm,
my high heels at the time, um, felt so vindicating and so empowering that I actually don't have to eat shit anymore. I can
mhm.
walk away.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I think so many of us, what's really interesting to me is that the corporate world, or any job, actually, any job, the human interactions and um, and structure end up taking very family like dimensions over. So if we overlay a family's footprint over a work footprint, they often take on they look very similarly. Like if we took, one of those see-through slides and layered them on top of each other, I think that the DNA of them would be very similar, because there's always someone who does the most work in a family or in a workplace. There's always a slacker. There's always someone who's a little backstabbing. There's always someone who's really earnest. And the dysfunction of people living in interacting with their family members or interacting with their coworkers when they haven't gone to therapy and started to analyze and take responsibility for their own stuff that they bring into the family or workplace dynamics, ends up playing out in potentially really toxic ways. And
Mhm,
I see it, my husband still works in the corporate world, and I see it at his job all the time. He'll and he'll come home and talk about, what's going on. And I'm like, I wish that person would go to therapy. Because they're
Yeah.
taking their shit out on everybody at work.
Right.
And you see the same
Right.
stuff in a family. And
Yeah.
it's really interesting. And also, bosses almost take on parental like roles, right? Because that person's controlling your money, that
Yeah.
person's controlling your power because their ability to control your money controls your power, right? If you don't have enough money, it's like they're giving you your allowance in a very
Yeah.
parental way. And it's really fascinating if you start to look at it.
And then you emancipate yourself. You're free. And then it's like, oh, whoa. Now, I will say, as someone who recognizes the personality traits as a perfectionist in recovery, I could say, like, because as you said, like checkbox, 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 ladder, ladder, ladder. And now that's all gone. You're waking up whenever you want, even though you still wake up the same time, but you could wake up whenever you want. And you're like, what the hell am I supposed to do now? And talk a little bit about the courage it took to put yourself out there without structure, without
Mm.
all of that experience that you now had racked up as a seasoned PR director. Now you're a brand new yogi instructor, or trying to be, or maybe gonna be. That's a lot.
Starting over is hard, and that's why people stay in toxic relationships, whether it
Mhm.
is a personal relationship, a love relationship, a friendship, or a work relationship. That's why people stay in jobs and relationships that are toxic and hurtful, because it is easier to stay with the devil than it is to
Mhm.
leave and start over. Starting over is so scary
Yeah.
and hard, because as humans we crave the familiar and fear the unknown. And it was very hard. And also as Americans, it's really interesting because we live in such a obsessed culture. The first thing, if you meet another American, the first thing they'll say is, "Oh, what's your name? And what do you do?" As though what you do is who you are.
Right.
Whereas if you are living outside the US, which I've had the privilege to do, both I've lived in Australia and I've lived in London, you might talk to someone for many hours before they say, "Oh, what do you do for work?"
Yeah.
And
Right. Right.
because they are honoring subconsciously, they're not aware that that's different here, but they're honoring that what you do for work is not what you do,
Right.
period. And they're honoring that's a facet of your life, not the entirety of your identity. And so the reason it's so hard for us as Americans to start over, even harder than anyone else, which is always hard and scary again because it's unknown, is because work is such a huge consuming part of our identities and our lives in this country and this culture. And so to leave the safety and the comfort of the title of head of PR, comma, at this big important company, comma, with an office, comma, and a big fat six-figure salary, exclamation point, is hard. And then to go
Mhm.
back to the starting line when you're really far down that career path and say, I'm starting over and I'm looking for
Yeah.
an unpaid internship, or an unpaid position. It is humbling, and it is hard. It is hard to start over, and it is scary to start over. For all of these reasons: identity, financial security, and the ego, the hubris of saying, "I'm Sara DiVello, comma, head of PR at this, multi-million or multi-billion dollar company." And
Mhm.
that
Right.
is why it's scary. And
Yes.
I'm here to say it is indeed that freaking scary.
And you had this awareness that you wrote about at the end of the book, which is really, I want you to know, even all these years later, it was very calming and soothing for me to hear this awareness that I want to share with all of our listeners, and that is, abruptly it dawns on me that life, or at least huge chunks of it, lies in those in between parts, and in the
Mm,
transformative process we experience while we try to get to wherever we are going.
yes.
Yeah, right. That it's we're often striving, striving,
Yes.
striving for that next. And life exists in the process, not in the outcome. And even the most frustrating, uncertain aspects of the transition of the process, which mostly it is, like so much of
Mm.
life is that. It's how do we just realize that is life and to try to settle into it.
Oh my God. Yes. Yes. Yes to all of that. Oh, so beautifully, poignantly, and perfectly said. That is life. And how do we settle into it? Because it's so easy to get sucked into it, so perfectly said, the striving toward the next goal. And then we
Mhm.
get to that goal and we don't even enjoy it because we're already saying, well, now I want a bigger office, or now I want a bigger raise, or now I want a bigger home, or, the next thing. And you can literally lose an entire life like that. And so I
Right.
try now, and I'm still guilty of this, but I really try now to use the tools of yoga and of therapy of being present. And that is hard because, again, it's easy to get sucked into the busyness, but of grounding my feet to the floor, putting my one hand on my heart, one hand on my
Mhm.
belly, taking 3 deep breaths, and just, in the words of Krishna Das, being here now.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
it's not, like this latest book, Broadway Butterfly, took me 9 years of my life to write.
9 years.
And 9 years. I started that book when I was in my mid-30s. I'm in my mid-40s now. I'm turning 46 on Sunday. And it would be really easy just to stay focused on, the book launch. I had my book launch last night. It was the greatest day of my life. It was better than my wedding. It was just so wonderful. But at the end of the day, that was one day.
Right.
And
Right.
it would be really, if I had not tried to really be present and enjoy the research and the writing and even the editing, which is my nemesis, I could very easily just not be present in that practice of that, the work of that, because I would be only be thinking about the day of the launch, the day of the launch, the day of the launch, and
Right.
it's about slowing down and grounding yourself and taking a deep breath and enjoying that walk with your dog. Or, I'm such a dog person. I'm such an animal person, but especially a dog person, burrowing my face in her beautiful tiny neck and breathing in the sweet scent of her, and and listening to her little grunties or her little stomach gurgles, and just smelling her and touching her and feeling her and loving her, and just saying, you know what, this moment is perfect because I'm with her. And
Mm.
applying
Yes.
that same joy and that same, even when it's hard, that same
Right.
presence of being in the practice, of saying, today I'm working on this page. Today I'm going to this library. And what a joy to be in this library,
Mhm.
what a beautiful meal. What a beautiful blue sky. Or, hey, it's raining, but I love that too. It's about being present, because if you're not present, you're going to miss it.
Mhm. That actually reminds me of maybe you were in my head last night. So I, occasionally, um, you know, don't sleep well, and then when I don't sleep well, my mind starts going, and I have to work very hard to sort of put my mind aside and ground myself.
Mm,
And actually, last night, as it was happening, again, you just must have been your words must have been in my head because I remember saying, "This is uncomfortable."
mm.
And I am just going to sit with the uncomfortableness of it and see what happens.
Yes. Yes. Yes, exactly. So first of all, I'm glad I was in your head. That's a very good head to be in. I'll
Yeah.
happily be in Dr. Dan's head. I'll transport myself over there anytime. I would
Thank
like to
you.
be in this particular head. And I also, and thank you for sharing that sometimes struggle with sleep. I find that incredibly comforting to know that I'm not the only one, because if Dr. Dan struggles with sleep, it makes it a little more okay that I do as well. And as someone, I'm very open about the fact that I struggle with anxiety. I always have. And that also results in anxiety driven insomnia. And
Yep.
it's very easy to catastrophize that,
Yes.
well, now I'm only going to get 7 hours of sleep. Well, now I'm only going to get 4 hours of sleep. Now I'm only going to get 2.5 hours of sleep, and I'm going to feel like crap. And then I'm going to have trouble concentrating. And then I'm not going to
Yep.
feel good, and I won't be my best. And then that interview, and then you could really, if you have anxiety, start to spiral up into, and now, and I hate not sleeping, and this sucks. And you could really start to spiral up, or at least I could.
Yeah.
But
I'm with you. I'm with you. Yeah.
it's I have realized that, people, and again, especially Western people, not just Americans, but Western culture is very focused on escaping discomfort. So we have, a medicine for everything. Oh, you have a headache, take a Tylenol. You have this, take that. Oh, it's all about escaping that. And I just want to say, I mean, I take I take Tylenol, I take Advil, whatever, I want to, there's no need to be in pain.
Right.
But I also want to look at the fact that that is a very Western construct. So, for instance, I learned in my yoga teacher training that in Eastern philosophy, in Hindu philosophy, it's very different. So their belief system is suffering is inevitable.
Mm-hmm.
We're all going to suffer. The choice that you have is how long you choose to prolong that suffering by A, anticipatory dread,
Mm-hmm.
and B, post suffering reliving of the suffering. So if you have, let's say, 5 inches of suffering or 5 days of suffering, that's inherent. Accept it. You're not escaping it. There's no Tylenol for you. Your choice is if you spend another 5 days anticipating how much that's going to suck, and
Mm-hmm.
then another 5 days afterward reliving how very much it sucked. And
Right.
that very different thinking about the prolonging of one's suffering and the accepting of some level of inherent suffering was a big mind shift for me.
Mm-hmm.
So if we go back to your insomnia moment, your insomnia, and that and whatever suffering, mental or physical, that was going to incur for you would be unavoidable. That is what it is. And that's
Mm-hmm.
a very Hindu
Right.
thing to say.
Right.
Your choice, your only
Yeah.
ability to control that is how much you prolong it on either side. And as you said, you chose not to. You chose
Mm-hmm.
to stop the spiral and just say, I'm going
Yes.
to breathe through this. And so
Yeah.
you shrunk your suffering back to the whatever bare minimum was inherent in that experience. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what I try to do on my best days.
Beautiful. Beautiful. And I just want to throw this in there because you triggered a few things based on your love of your dog and also the suffering. We not that long ago had a very sudden and traumatic pet loss,
Oh,
and in a way that we couldn't even anticipate things going down or anticipate how hard it was because of how it all went down.
hmm,
And it was about a week that my wife and I we were not ourselves. And
hmm,
people would ask, "Are you okay?" People who knew and people who didn't know. And I just maybe just being older, not fighting it. It was like, "Yeah, actually, I'm just not feeling like myself. We've had a hard situation." And it
hmm,
really was about this. It's what's it you like what you triggered this because it was about 5 to 6 days of really feeling not good. Like there was
hmm,
suffering. And then there was about 5 days of that distance and reflection as
hmm,
we started to come back to ourselves and then try to, incorporate the traumatic experience and the loss. And then you move on and life goes on. But I've had plenty of times in my life where you're just resisting. I'm resisting the
yes,
suffering, right? As opposed to
yes.
just allow it and accept it as a part of life, particularly when certain events happen.
Exactly. And I think, well, first of all, I just want to say I am so very sorry for your loss. And my heart breaks with and for you to think of how painful that is. And it is the day I dread most with my
Yeah.
own little Palu. And I try not to think about it too much, but it is something I think about almost every day. And it preemptorily breaks my heart. But then I think, oh, I'm prolonging my suffering. So try to
Right.
be present
Right.
in this. But I just want to say I'm so, so
Yeah.
sorry. And I
Thank you.
think the what you said about resistance is so perfect and on point, because it's about the that resistance is prolonging it.
Yeah.
And it's hard not to resist it, because of course, if something is so painful, we don't want to go through it. Nobody wants to
No.
suffer. Nobody wants to hurt and be heartbroken. But that resistance is ultimately only prolonging it. And, and that's
Yeah.
the really hard stuff.
Yes. Well, thank you for your thoughts. I hesitated to even tell the story because knowing how you feel about your animals, I was like, I don't want to put that on you, but I felt it was important. And so thank you. We need to transition to this next phase of from now, from yogi teacher to mystery crime murder researcher and writer. So please share how that happened.
Yeah, so it's interesting, right? Because I think a lot of people think yoga teacher to, murder, maven of all things murder and mayhem. What the heck happened? Talk about a 180. But what I think is really interesting is that we're all multifaceted beings, right? You're not just this podcast host. You are not just a husband. You are not. None of us are any just one thing. We are all many things. And I always try to think of it as a diamond, a multifaceted diamond, because diamonds have many facets. So, what are the many facets of your life, of the entirety and complexity and wholeness of your humanity? That's a question I would love everyone to take a moment and explore. Just free write for a few minutes. What are all of my interests? What is the entirety of me? And you can start to really explore who you are and start to focus in on some of the other sources of joy and interests for yourself. And it doesn't have to be a big exercise. It can be, a minute or 3 minutes. And that is something that I do, and so as a yogi, I recognize that there is always another, actually, I want to say that again, Dr. Jan. As a writer, I recognize that there is always a next chapter. And your life and your book of life has many chapters.
Mm-hmm.
And those chapters may seem very different and very cognitively dissonant, because you like murder, but you're Zen. Like, what? And the answer is yes. I like murder and mayhem, and I am also very Zen. I love yoga and meditating every day. And those are two of some of my many facets. And the tools of yoga gave me the mental and energetic ability to look at the entirety of my humanity and accept all of these many facets about myself.
You are, you're speaking to our audience because we have several Murderino listeners out there who are big fans of my favorite murder podcast and Exactly Right Media. So you are speaking the language of our people,
Yes.
and about the multifacets of you can be this and be that, and
Yes.
and that it's authentic for many to be fascinated with humans and how humans can do certain things and the lives of the victims and finding justice, right? This is
Yes.
a big push, I know, for many of the people who are in this space, is to tell the story of the victims on the road to hopefully seeking justice, or to for some closure for families. Which, oh my gosh, I know your mind is, everyone, like,
Yes.
we're resonating right now, and
Yes.
then your book, oh my gosh, and you're gonna have to leave. There's no spoilers. I'm not doing any spoilers, but it's like the road to the discovery of this murder 100 years ago with
Mm.
a socio-political climate which is not very different than now in many, many
Yes.
ways. Yes.
Yes, exactly. Oh my God. Yes, I'm resonating with everything that you're saying. And yes to all of that. I am a I am a person who likes closure, who likes clarity, and who cares very deeply about justice and what is fair. And I think that the reason so many of us are fascinated by true crime is because we are fascinated by how freaking crazy people can really be and how really crazy real life can be. And, I am hashtag Team Twain. I think Mark Twain was right. I think truth is stranger than fiction. And I freaking love that
Mm-hmm.
because, the burden on a fiction writer is to make an imaginary world believable. This person I just made up, let me make them feel real to you. But as a nonfiction writer, I can lean into the ludicrous. And I love that. So these people who are so wild and crazy and fascinating and true people, I can portray them in the full bodiedness and the fascinating nature of who they really are. Because when someone says, oh, that would never happen, I can say, oh, but it did. And I
Yes.
love that. And I
Yes.
wanted to explore this crime because Dot King was murdered and
Mm-hmm.
someone literally got away with murder. That
Yes.
person, that murderer, got to walk around among the rest of us as though he was a normal person and not a
Right.
murderer. He got
Right.
away with murder. And
Right.
it's not fair. And she was wronged 3 times in my mind. She was murdered. Her life was cut short by that,
Mm-hmm.
by someone taking her life. Number 2, she was wronged by a system where corruption was rampant and political power, curtailed the investigation. And she, was then victimized by the system. And number 3, she was denied truth and light and justice. And so my goal 100 years later, the 100-year anniversary of the crime, is to bring
Mm-hmm.
this crime to light so that in some small way, she who was so wronged in so many ways can have her day and have the dignity of truth and light and justice be brought to her, even if it's just revealing her murderer so that he doesn't get away with it anymore.
And you did exactly that.
Oh, thank you.
I just kept reading and reading and reading and reading, and then of course the characters become part of one's daily life. And I'm thinking like, what's Inspector Coughlin doing, and what's Julia gonna, what's, this strong woman reporter, again, ahead of her time in a field of men, right? What is
Yes.
she gonna do? And is she gonna stop? Like, this is getting really dangerous. And man, and as you said, these are all real people.
Yes.
So I have a few behind the scenes questions for you. One is, when you did, so 9 years of research,
Mm.
1,500 documents, hundreds of interviews, what percent becomes fact, and then how you fill in the pieces of the personalities and the
Mm.
dialogue? Is that even a fair question about how you put that all together?
That's a very fair question. So 9 years, and I think it was even 1,700 plus pieces of
Wow.
original research later. I could give you an exact number, but I'd have to go back and recount. I wanted everything in this book to be factually true because these are real people and because someone did get away with murder. I felt that in order to honor these real life people, I had to adhere to the truth. And I
Mm-hmm.
did that. However, 9 years in, I can tell you that some things can't be gotten, even for an anxious, OCD riddled person like me, who's determined to get to the
Yeah.
truth. Some things can't. So,
Yes.
interrogation scenes behind closed doors of Detective John D. Coughlin interrogating the suspects.
Right.
I could not get those. I could not get all of those. I could get some of those because what's really interesting is that reporters had a lot closer relationship with police than they do now. So reporters had a press room in the police station, and actually just sometimes desks in the actual,
Mm.
police room, where some reporters could, later complained in the Pinkerton report in 1928, I believe it was, that they could hear the screams of suspects who were given the so-called third degree, which is to be tortured to get
Mm-hmm.
information out of them. But they couldn't say anything about it, because if they were to report the screams of the suspects that they heard being subjected to torture, they would be removed. Their desk would be moved out into the hall, or they would not be allowed in the police station. They wouldn't have access to sources. They then couldn't tell their stories, meet their deadlines, and have a job and an income. So nobody said anything for fear of retribution and retaliation. But they often were allowed into the interrogation rooms, and they would then report on it, but in a in a
Yeah.
non, totally condemning way. So a lot of that information in terms of the interrogations I got from the actual reporting, because those reporters had access to that. So a lot of the dialogue, a lot of the information about the interrogations, how many interrogations, how long, how many hours they went on for with no breaks and no water and no bathroom, were reported in the newspapers. They didn't specifically say they did not allow the suspect out to go to the bathroom, but they would say that, the suspect was interrogated for this many hours, was subjected to, they would say something like, unrelenting interrogation for so many hours. So you know what they're saying without really saying it. The
Mm-hmm.
dialogue, I got a lot of direct pull quotes from those newspapers. Now, the emotional, so I took everything I could from the reporting, from the memoirs that were written by the head of the homicide division, the secretary to the police commissioner, everything that I could get directly, I put in there. Now, the things that I couldn't get, I had to fill in. So if there was one line of dialogue, but then that the suspect responded with something, but their response was not included, I might have to fill that in. But
Mm-hmm.
I read those articles, then I dictated them aloud into a recording device so that it would be, typing it for me, so that I could memorize and really embed in my brain the rhythm of every single character's speech, their
Mm.
accent, their word choice, the rhythm and patter of how they spoke, so that when I had to recreate that dialogue, it was so deeply embedded in me that I
Yeah.
could formulate it pretty realistically.
So you basically also have to become an actor, like an actor for each of the characters, like embody
Yes.
each of those characters to get in their mind while you're playing out this drama.
Oh my God, that's a really good way of thinking of it, and I hadn't actually thought of it that way. So thank you for that, framing it that way. I love that. And yes, because my goal was, I had read somewhere, and I can't remember where now, that if you're writing multiple points of view, and I told the story through 4 points of view: the detective who was the head of the
Yep.
investigation, the lead crime reporter who reported on it, the closest friend, confidant, and keeper of the secrets of the victim, and a society woman who's in Palm Beach, who's working very hard to get the presidential incumbent reelected. I wanted you to be able to cover the name of the person who was narrating that chapter and know who it was through how they spoke and how they
Yeah.
saw the
Yeah.
world. And in
Yeah.
order to do that, I had to get in their skin and their mind and their words, and be able to beam that out to the reader.
Mm-hmm. And I loved the rhythm because at first when you start reading the book, you're always trying to for me, I'm always trying to figure out, okay, who's talking, where are we, what place and time is this, and then very quickly you
Mm,
could I could see the rhythm, and then I was just, okay, this person's talking, and now next chapter I'm guessing it's going to be one of these people talking, and then you start to,
mm,
like, you're in it, and then, like I said, the characters become temporarily part of your life. And
mm.
um, did you have a favorite perspective of the four?
I do. Julia's my favorite. I
Yeah,
love them
I thought you were
all.
gonna I thought you were gonna say that. Yes.
I love them all, but Julia is my favorite. I love her the
Yeah.
most.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, she was an amazing, powerful, courageous crime reporter, and she would be very proud to say that you told her story, and you are also venturing a bit on that path as well.
Thank you.
Hopefully in
And
a safe, hopefully in a much safer space.
oh my God. Yes.
Yes,
Because
yes,
this book also made me, I wanted to bring Julia to light as well, because this is one of the 6 pioneering women of journalism at the turn of the century. And her story has been completely forgotten by time and covered by time's dust. And that's not fair. And I wanted to reveal her truth and her story to the world, because this is an incredible woman, a powerful woman, and her story deserves to be known by the world. She should be taught in classrooms and history of journalism classes, and the world deserves to know who
yeah,
she is and
yes,
how she blazed this trail for so many women who came before her. I mean, any woman who is working in journalism today can thank her and these other pioneer women for hacking that trail through the wilderness for them. And
yeah,
nobody knows who she is. And so I wanted to also bring that to light, and I feel like that is justice for her. And also, it made me think, because she was willing to literally risk her life, put herself in harm's way. I mean,
mm-hmm.
she shared in a 1932 book, which was written by another pioneering woman of journalism whose name was Ishbel Ross. And she had the forethought to say, I think I better get some of these stories down firsthand of these other women and me, because these are stories that deserve to be told. And that book is called Ladies of the Press.
Mm.
Um, Julia told her that her life had been threatened multiple times, not just once. And it really made me think, what am I willing to risk my life for? What am I
Mm-hmm.
willing to literally possibly die for?
Yeah,
And I think that's
yeah.
a question we should all ask ourselves, because you're going to get real clear real fast on what your priorities are. Like,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm also just going to quick tangent of a shout out for another courageous woman who speaks about this, Martha Beck, in her book Way of Integrity. Oh my
yes.
God, a life changing book for myself, for so many of my clients and
Yes.
friends, and it just, because she was faced with that same thing, this integrity, this truth and
Mm.
justice at the potential expense of harm. And so it's just so courageous to even consider that, acting in that way.
Yes, and that book was just recommended to me by my very dear friend Lisa Genova, who's also an author and a Harvard-trained neuroscientist, and she wrote the incredible book Still Alice and 6 other books, 5 works of fiction and 1 nonfiction about, which was her most recent book, The Science of Memory and the Art of Forgetting. And she just texted me and said, "Oh my God, you have to read this book." So Martha's Beck, The Way of Integrity, is next up on the TBR for me.
Awesome. Awesome. You're going to love it. Okay. We have, do you still have a little more time? Because
Yeah,
we
yeah,
got more to talk about. And
yes.
we could talk so much more about Broadway Butterfly and everyone. Just, it's so, so good. And so I'm so excited for your
Oh,
launch. We'll loop back in a moment, but we have to
thank you.
end with this very, very important topic. Here
Mm.
we are, you're on this podcast called Parent Footprint. And Parent Footprint is more than it seems in the name.
Mm,
What we really focus on is individual adults, many who are in a role of parent, not just to children, but to nieces, to students, to their athletes, to their animals. It's about making the world a more loving and compassionate place by being self evolved and aware human adults. Like the focus is on the adults. And
mm,
so we have many listeners and have had many guests who have chosen to be either non parents to humans or very real parents to their animals, such as you. And I'd like us to talk about that choice, what that choice means, and some of the realities of that choice in our modern world with expectations and perspectives.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. So my husband and I have chosen to be child free. And I knew from very early on, I did not want to parent. So I have very clear memories of being a little girl, and oftentimes little girls in this culture will carry around little baby dolls and put them in little strollers and push them and change them and dress them and mother them. And I remember being in groups of other little kids, and the little girls would be carrying around their dolls. And I was carrying around this briefcase and staring at them, and they would, tell me about their babies, their baby dolls. And I remember saying, I don't want to have a baby. I want to go to work. And I was a little, I think I was no more than 5. I
Wow.
was very clear. I just
Mm-hmm.
always knew this was not for me. And I think that I recognize that parenting is a job. And I'm the oldest of 4 children. And so I think I got a taste of parenting early on. And then I worked as a nanny one summer in college. And I think that everyone should be required to work as a nanny because it gives you
Yeah.
a very clear idea of what parenting is. And then you can see before you have your own, is this for me or is this not for me? And I it was further cemented in my mind, this is not for me. So again, recognizing it's a job, I looked at this job and said, there is other work that is more interesting and more um, calling me more than this work. And the
Mm-hmm.
work that I have chosen to do is writing and teaching yoga, where I do feel that I nurture and mother my students. And my students have, told me that they feel very nurtured and supported by me. And another one of your past guests, Caroline Levitt,
Mm-hmm.
um, she's very open about, she has chosen to parent, but she's very open about, she grew up in a tough family, and she posts every Mother's Day on social media that, hey, this is a tough day for a lot of people whose mothers were not what they wanted, or who either choose not to be mothers, or who can't be mothers, or who are estranged from their mothers or their daughters. And she always emails me and she says, Sara, I love you and I feel very mothered by you.
Mm.
And I hope that you feel mothered by me. And I do. And so, to your point, I think that
Yeah.
there are a lot of ways to mother and parent and to nurture and be nurtured that are outside of the traditional role of of having a tiny human,
Mm-hmm.
birthing or adopting or fostering a tiny human and raising them to adulthood. And I have chosen these other ways. So I have 5 godchildren
Mm.
and 1 doggy daughter. And those are the ways that I have chosen to nourish and be
Yes.
nourished.
Beautiful. And what would you say to all of us who, I would say, often unknowingly make comments or judgments? You tell me. Like what, like, in terms of the the I feel my sense, as from talking to others in your situation as well, the otherness that gets sort of perpetuated by especially our generation. I think, as we discussed earlier, like, not maybe as much as the newer generation, but as more of our generation, there's this expectation, and if you don't meet an expectation, it doesn't always feel good. And again,
Mm.
and I don't think a lot of people, like, some people might be intentional. And I think a lot of people just are missing it. And I that's why, Caroline's um, messages to you are so intentional. It's like
Mm.
the opposite of what I'm trying to describe here. Yeah.
I think it's so easy to get swept up into the busyness and into expectations that it feels like it's not an if, but when. I
Right.
think so often we just think to ourselves, there's a path. It's like a freeway, and you get sucked. You're on the on ramp, and you accelerate, and you get on the freeway, and you have to accelerate to keep up with other traffic, and it's very easy to, or it's like, going into a stream and getting carried by a current. And if everybody is swimming downstream and everybody's going the same direction, it's very easy to just get swept along with the current and think, well, I'm going to graduate high school, then I'm going to go to college, then I'm going to meet someone, then I'm going to get married, then I'm going to have kids, then we're going to move to the suburbs, then we're going to parent them, then they're going to go to high school, then they're going to go to college, then they're going to have kids. And you don't realize that those are actually all choices.
Right.
And I think most people think, when am I going to have kids? Without realizing it's actually if I'm going to have kids.
Mm-hmm.
And so even though I knew from the time I was 5 years old, I wanted to write and I did not want to parent, I still found myself saying things in group conversations like, oh yeah, when I have kids, and I would feel sick to my stomach when I said it. I actually felt like I wanted to cry or run away or throw up, because I knew I didn't want to do this, but everyone else was saying it. So I felt like I had to, because it would be so unfathomable to say, actually, I don't want to do that. And if everyone else is like, oh my God, I can't wait to have kids. Oh my God, it's going to be so cute. And then their little outfits, and then we're going to take them for walks together, and we're going to push them on the swings together. And then they're going to have play dates, and they're going to be best friends. And then we're going to be best friends, and their kids are going to be best friends. And then if someone has a boy and then they get married, and then our kids will get married, and you get swept up into these, daydreams and these expectations. And if someone says in that group of chattering excitement, actually, I don't want to do what all of you are saying you can't wait to do, let me assure you, conversation comes to a screeching halt, and everyone stares at you like you just said you like to eat bugs. And if everyone else is talking about how great chocolate cake is, and you say, chocolate cake makes me freaking sick, I don't want to do that. It makes people feel bad about themselves liking chocolate cake or whatever.
Absolutely. Right.
And I think that's really interesting, because when parents share their joy, their picture of their adorable chubby cheeked baby, or baby's first ice cream, or baby's first tooth, or, baby's first crawling step, everyone else celebrates that, because almost everyone else has kids, and they're either anticipating those moments that they'll have, or they're reliving those moments that they did have already. And everyone celebrates that, including the child-free. But when child-free people share their joy, like, hey, I slept in until noon today and it was delightful. Or, hey, I went for a quiet walk with my husband and nobody cried and no one had a temper tantrum and we didn't have to turn back early. Or sometimes my husband and I will go out for dinner on Mother's Day, and nobody pukes or poops or has to go home early because the babysitter has to get to school or has to get the train home or whatever. And it's really lovely, but I don't share those moments, because when a child-free person shares their joy, oftentimes it is perceived by the parenting world to be an inherent criticism of their choice to opt in. And I'm not quite sure why that is, because again, when parents share their joy, it is supported by those in the child-free community. But I think it's so scary to people to make a different choice, because it makes people who maybe haven't thought about this is an if, not a when, think, oh my God, or what are you saying about me and my beautiful little, baby? And it is a very interesting and very complicated thing. And another thing that people say is, they'll say childless.
Which I realize I said that instead of child-free. I was going to correct myself. So say the difference, please.
The difference is that childless is one of those old-fashioned terms from the patriarchy, like spinster, childless.
Apologies.
dried up old prune. You have sinned against the patriarchy.
Yes, yes.
Whereas child free is a positive, like fat free, cholesterol free, expectation free. It's a choice and it's a celebration and it's inherently positive. But
Yes.
again, it's so deeply embedded in our language and in our vernacular. And those expectations are so deeply embedded that we just say it without thinking. And I said it
Yes.
without thinking for so long. But one of the things that people say to child free people is, who's going to take care of you? Who's going to remember you? What about your legacy? And I think it's really interesting because I personally would never have children because I'm not here to breed a future caretaker. I would never expect to another human being to spend their life taking care of me in my old age. That's a big burden to put on somebody. And what if your kid wants to be an astronaut or a scuba diver or a Navy SEAL or a CIA agent and they have to be embedded in Russia or, somewhere in the Middle East and they're not there to push your wheelchair or feed you your lunch. I think what if I did choose to have children, I would have also chosen to consciously manage my life and manage my finances so that I could afford to hire an actual professional caretaker instead of putting that burden and expectation and responsibility on my child. So that's the first thing is I don't expect anyone to take care of me. I want to take care of myself and I want to create a financial plan to, if I do need that care down the road, that I can hire someone who chooses to do that work.
Yes.
Not burdening someone who didn't maybe choose to do that work, but who happens to be my child, so therefore must. The second thing that I want to say is this book, Broadway Butterfly, felt especially meaningful to me because Julia Hartman and her husband chose not to have children.
Right.
And Dot King chose not to have children, although that choice was actually robbed from her because she was murdered. She may have chosen to have children down the road. We'll never know because that was one more thing that she was robbed of. Frances and Ella chose to have children. They did choose to parent. John D. Coughlin, Inspector John D. Coughlin, head of the detectives unit, he chose not to have children and he actually chose not to marry. So I have 3 child-free people and 2 parenting people, characters in my book. And I think, again, the first thing people say is, who's going to remember you? You're not going to be remembered. And I think the thing that I have to say is, number one, there's a lot of different ways to be remembered. My husband and I do a lot of do a lot of charity work. One of the organizations we have supported and are heavily involved with is Friends of the Children Boston, which supports the most at-risk, vulnerable children in Boston. And actually, that's a nationwide organization that goes into the schools and kindergarten, identifies the most at-risk children, and provides them with full-time paid mentorship, K through 12, with the goal of breaking the cycles of generational poverty, teenage pregnancy, and incarceration with a 99% success rate.
That's incredible.
There's a lot of different ways to serve and to create a legacy of service and to create a life of meaning that does not include breeding. And I invite people to take a look at that. The second thing is, you never know that if in 100 years, another child-free person might come along and think your life and your work and your choices are extraordinary and write a book about you.
Yes.
And so I have chosen to honor all of my characters, the parents and the non-parents, and honor them and their legacy in the pages of my book and with anyone who reads them. So now you, Dr. Dan, you know about these extraordinary people. And it feels really special and really meaningful because, again, one of the first things people say to child-free people is, well, who's going to remember you? Well, here I am. I'm remembering you. And my very dear friend, Dorothy Stover, said to me, she's part Indigenous. And she said, in my tradition, you don't die when your physical body dies. You die when someone stops speaking your name. So in Indigenous culture, you speak the names of the dead to keep them alive. And so every day I speak the names of these people in my book and I keep their names alive. And that feels very meaningful.
Thank you for sharing your perspective. I will make sure that I speak it accurately And this is really important. This is really important. I want to say the other thing from someone, I'll speak for myself as someone with children. When
Mm,
when I hear about or talking with someone who is child free and their aspects of their life and the freedom, there's jealousy, right? Like this whole parenting
ooh,
thing, like, let's just be honest, like
ooh,
parenting, right? Parenting is, it's not easy. And I
not
think if
easy.
we're being authentic, we're talking about, there's highs and there's lows,
Mm,
and it can be exhausting.
mm,
And there are different various degrees of self-sacrifice. We didn't talk about self-care earlier, but another
mm,
theme um, your own book. And so I
mm,
just want to throw that out there so everyone, for parents to be aware that sometimes maybe our responses are in a coping mechanism to feel okay about our choice as
mm,
parents in relation to a child-free person's choice and the different life experiences that they might have because they're not parenting in the same way. So I'm saying that really generally,
mm,
but I just want to own that. Like at times it's like, wow, oh my gosh, like no screaming, no waking
mm.
up in the middle of the night. Again, I'm just focusing on an aspect of this, but the stuff you said, and you got to sleep in, you had a nice walk, you didn't have to think about this or this, that also is a great choice. Like that is a great
Mm,
choice. So I just want us all to think about what you said about choice and think about
mm,
how we respond to people. Again, back to your yogi book, thinking about other people's stories and other people's
mm.
narratives, and how for us not to indulge in them too much, but also not to judge. Like, I think we all just have to really think about what we say, and we're allowed to think whatever we think because we're humans. But let's be aware of what we're thinking, and let's ask ourselves some questions, and let's be aware and more purposeful when we interact with others.
Thank you so much for saying that. And your vulnerability now gives me permission and courage to vulnerably share back, which is there is also jealousy and fear from my perspective looking inward, which is that I am afraid of missing out. I am afraid of having regrets later. And there are days that are lonely and feel a little bit empty. And those days, specifically for me and my husband, are holidays. So,
Mhm.
specifically Christmas, because Christmas is such a child centered holiday where you wake up at the crack of dawn and you run into the living room and you dive down to sit beside the tree and you rip open the presents and you're so excited and you're so happy, and then you have breakfast and you do whatever the rest of your Christmas Day tradition is. Christmas is still something that we are trying to figure out how to do without kids. And Easter also, because we don't have Easter eggs to hide for anybody. And so those days are challenging and feel a little hollow and a little empty to us because we haven't figured out, because there is no blueprint, because we don't have anyone who's ahead of us who's saying this is how you do child-free Christmas, this is how you do child-free Easter, because
Mhm.
it is so unusual for people of our generation to choose child-free. And in fact, one of my husband's college friends who's a year or two behind him said, we've been looking at you, waiting for you to create the blueprint how to do this, because she and
Mm.
her partner are 90% committed to the child free path. And she was like, I don't know how to do this. How do you guys do it? And it's like, oh my God, we got to figure this out for everybody.
Mm.
But there is fear on my part, because at 45, I'm like, I feel good about child free, but will I feel that good at 50 or 55? But then it's too late for me to start then, because I don't want to leave a kid, you know, potentially,
Mhm.
I don't want to be a 75-year-old whose kid has graduated from college. And so I have
Yeah.
those fears
Yeah.
too. This is not stone clad. It's malleable and it's scary and it's hard. And there are
Yeah.
days when I I babysit a lot. And, when you give them their bath and you put them in their little footy jammies and they smell like Johnson's baby shampoo and you snuggle them up and they're this warm little nugget and you read them a book and then they say more and you read them another book and they say more but you like to read, so it's okay. And I think this
Mhm.
is pretty great too, you
Yeah.
know? And so there
Yeah.
is that for
Yeah.
me, and I own that. But I
Yeah.
also think that, me being child free enables me to show up for my parenting friends. So when any friend of mine
Right.
has a baby, I cook 5 days of meals, complete with side dishes. I box them up like I'm DoorDash, and I bring them to the hospital and I say, here's your meals for the next 5 days. Here's your main courses. Here's your side dishes. Here's your salads and your salad dressings. I box them up individually and I bring lavender lotion and I massage their feet and their swollen legs. And I say, I want to take care of you. And I'm
Mm.
able to show up for them in that way because I don't have children myself. If I
Yeah.
was stressed and tired and
Yeah.
exhausted and only got 2 hours of sleep and had someone with, a fever or home from daycare or whatever the case is, I wouldn't have the bandwidth to show up for those who are parenting in that way. Or a friend will text and say, oh my god, my kid's sick and they won't take them at daycare and I have a meeting, can you babysit? And the answer is yes, I can, because I'm not
Yeah.
dealing with that
Yeah.
myself. And so I being
Awesome.
child free actually
Yeah.
allows me to show up the more for those who do have children.
Thank you so much for that perspective and your vulnerability. And I think this just, shows all of us again, there's so many choices, there's so many paths, and it's always messy. There's no one right
Mhm.
way. There's no one wrong way. Like it just is. And it's messy. There's uncertainty. And as you have educated us, we need to try to stay in the moments, in the transitions, in the process, because none of us know where this thing is going. So we might as well focus on what we have right in front of us.
Yes, exactly. And let's celebrate each other's choices.
Hmm.
Let's show up for each other. I celebrate those who choose to parent. I'm happy for them that they have chosen that. I send outfits, I have food. I really want to be there for them in a meaningful way that feels nourishing and good for them. And to, and my friend who's also a psychiatrist, Dr. Samya Dave, devotes a lot of time and space to parenting and breaking generational trauma and parenting patterns. And she says, it really feels supportive to just get a text that says, I'm thinking of you and I don't need a reply, but I love you. And that's all. So I send those messages to her and to
Wonderful.
other
Nice.
parents.
Nice.
It's like, I want to celebrate and support you and
Yes.
your choices, whatever they are. And I would love if the child free community could start to receive some of that back,
Yes.
if, as you said, we could own our jealousies and our fears and just say,
Yeah.
celebrate the choice to not parent as well.
Well, it's actually time for the parent footprint moment question. I want to thank all of our listeners for listening. This has been such a rich, engaging conversation. This is a double show today. We got a double show, and it could go on. It could go on forever.
This
So
is a masterclass.
this is the masterclass in lots of different things. Okay, so here's the question, Sarah. Tell us about a time that you became aware of yourself as an individual, as a parent, godparent, pet parent, or even an awareness of your own parents. And that new awareness had a positive impact on your life, your children's life, and or those you love.
That is such a big, beautiful question. And I think there are many moments. I think it was when I was 5 years old and carrying my too big for my tiny body briefcase around, saying, I don't want a baby. I want to go to work. And I think about how, if things had been different back in the late 70s and early 80s, what if I had had an adult in my life that said, "That's great, Sarah. You should do that," instead of
Mm,
kind of saying, "Oh, she's eccentric. She'll probably change her mind." Or she's being very silly, I think about what that would have been like, and maybe I would have been able to stand stronger in my choices earlier
mhm,
in my
mhm.
life. I think about the moment
Yeah.
that my friend Rebecca's parents adopted Peluda's sisters from living in Texas. They found her mom and her litter mates under a shed, and she sent me a picture. She went home for Christmas and she sent me a picture. She said, "This is my mom's new puppy," and I said, "Oh my God, I want to adopt. Is there any left in the litter? I want to adopt one of these little fur balls." And she said, "There's one left, but she hasn't been adopted because she's the ugly one." And I knew immediately I had to have the ugly one, that I would parent the ugly one, who of course is completely adorable and utter perfection. And how I love this little 16-pound ball of fur with all of my heart and all of my soul and every cell in my body. I would die for her. And I think about how I love her completely and endlessly. And I think
Yeah.
about the moment that I gathered the courage to write in my journal, I want to write a book, because it felt too scary and too big to say out loud, and how I held that secret inside for years because I thought, who the hell am I to write a book? I'm not worthy. I can't do that. I don't have the tools, the skills, the talent, the training, the degree, the pedigree, the family money to do that. I'll never be able to do that. But I wrote it down and I held it as a tiny bud, a nascent bud in my heart. There's all these little moments that along the path that, if I string them together, creates a narrative arc of my own journey. And I just want to invite others to take the time to think about what they want to be remembered for and what they want their footprint on this life and on this earth to be comprised of, and to cultivate that footprint consciously.
A beautiful conclusion to our conversation that I don't want to end. And I think we're going to have another. I've really enjoyed speaking with you today, sharing this time with you. And thank you for sharing yourself with us, not only through your books, but through your honest, vulnerable, courageous self.
Oh my gosh, Dr. Dan, I love you. I'm tearing up over here. You're so wonderful, and you're so kind and so wise. And this has been a heart-filling, vulnerable making, courage cultivating conversation. And that is because of you and your training and your own self-work to be able to be present here and to hold that space for me so that I can start to peel the layers of the onion and let those thoughts out. So thank you. And I'm so grateful. And I'm actually tearing up over here. So thank you.
Oh, it's mutual. Thank you. Please tell everyone where this is just out. Broadway Butterfly just out. Please tell everyone where they can find it, what you're up to. And of course, I still also highly recommend your memoir, Where in the Ohm Am I, as well.
Thank you so much. So yeah, Broadway Butterfly just out. Thrilled that Entertainment Weekly picked it as a most anticipated book. AARP picked it as a most anticipated book. I just was so grateful to get a review from the Associated Press yesterday, and it is available anywhere that books are sold. You can get signed copies from Murder by the Book, which is an incredible woman-owned independent bookstore in Texas. You can get it from your local independent bookstore wherever you are based, from Amazon if you like to have that instant delivery. Wherever you like to buy your books, it is available. Where in the OMMI is available mostly at this point, because it is 10 years old, from Amazon. And you can find me. I'm very active on social media. I love to connect and talk and nerd out about all these things. So I am on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Threads, Facebook. I do it all. And I put a lot of the behind the scenes of my research into Doc King's murder, into Broadway Butterfly on my website, which is very mysterious. It is saradivello.com. And that's all on / behind the scenes. So you can see the places I went, the bowels of the New York Public Library, different places where the characters lived, where Dot King died. It's all on my website. So if you love to nerd out about this stuff, my true crime fans, check it out.
Awesome. So awesome. So excited for you. Wish you the best of luck, and looking forward to what's to come.
Thank you so very much. I have loved this time together.
Everyone, you know what to do. Send this to everyone you think will benefit and learn from it. Thank you for being a part of our community. Thank you for your 5-star reviews. They mean a lot to us. You know what I'm also going to ask you to do. Be your best to be that person that you want your child or your godchild to become. And ask yourself the guiding question I ask myself each day: what footprint do you want to leave? This has been a Peters and Rossi production. Parent Footprint with Dr. Dan is produced by Laura Rossi. Our engineer is Phil Rossi. Theme music is Strummer Man, composed and performed by Pro Tunes. Artwork is by Garrett Ross. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Parent Footprint Podcast and on Twitter at Dr. Dan Peters. For more information, go to exactlyrightmedia.com.